And our next speaker is Amanda L. Townley, Executive Director of the National Center for Science Education, by which I mean my boss.
I do get the opportunity to drive the coolest bus in town because I get to work with people like Glenn and our science education specialists, some of whom are here, and people like Ken Miller, and rub elbows with the Eric Rothschilds and Barb Forrest and so many others. But I wouldn't be able to do this, I'm sorry I'm calling you out, if it weren't for Eugenie Scott, who is also here with us today. Who has been fighting this fight far longer than this organization has been around. Now, I am the executive director of the National Center for Science Education, but in order to frame what I'm going to share with you today about the modern challenges to evolution education, we have to backtrack just a bit. Because before I was the executive director, I was an associate professor of science education. But before that, I was a classroom teacher in middle school and high school in both Alabama and Georgia. Before that, the middle school part or the Alabama-Georgia part? Before that, I was a student in Alabama schools in the 1990s. And before that, I was a young lady being raised by an amazing family in rural LA, Lower Appalachia, in northeastern Alabama, in a dirt floor Southern Baptist ministry family that was young earth creationist. That's a lot. So I come to you from that frame because if anybody can tell the flip side of the story and why this fight matters so much, it's me. Because I've lived this story. And it's because of people like Ken, Brianna Pobner, Gail Sinatra, Sean, all of these researchers that are doing the work, that are having the conversations, that are speaking publicly, that are advocating. Jeannie Scott, who put it out there and was willing to stand up and fight against whoever came at her, that I became an evolutionary biologist and science educator, regardless of my background, and regardless of the fact that when I got to honors biology in high school, we got to the chapter on evolution, and my teacher said, "Don't worry about that one. We're going to skip it because I don't believe in it." I learned about evolution formally in college and informally because I was a really good teenager that when my teacher said that, I just totally didn't open that chapter and read through everything. But having grown up on a farm with parents who taught me to question things and look at nature, I was a naturalist. It made sense, and that was the start of a journey that brought me to where I am now, but also helps me to have these conversations with you about what is the other side of those modern challenges. The court cases are important. They help give our teachers footing. They help protect our schools. They help us advocate for these things. But there's so much more to it because there are these factors inside and outside of classrooms that really have a massive impact on our society. Why are we still debating the teaching of evolution 100 years after Scopes? And to quote Glenn, yes, that is a rhetorical question. Our purpose thus far this morning has really been to not only celebrate what's happened in 100 years, but to reflect on the past in order to understand the fact that we're there yet again, but to make sure that we don't fail in the way that others have failed in ignoring the history and the lessons and the experts and the experiences that will allow us to have a positive impact. So let me ask you, how many of you learned about evolution in middle or high school? Raise your hand. Okay. How many people in here didn't? Thank you. Pretty evenly balanced. How many of you, the first time you heard about evolution was not in school? It was from your community, your family, or your church? Very often we put things in matters of black and white, but the reality is all of the world is gray. It's just varying shades of gray. So imagine that you're a new classroom teacher. You're walking out of a university loaded with student loans because You go into a classroom in the community that you came up in. You're given wonderful textbooks by Ken Miller. You have standards that say evolution in them. But you're in a community that you know is adamantly against that. What do you do? What do you do? This is the modern challenge of evolution education. It's a grassroots issue. 3 things we did learn from Scopes. Number 1, science can be on trial when the actual facts are not. We're on trial today as much as we were 100 years ago, as a field, as a way of thinking, as a way of knowing and explaining the world around us based on tangible evidence. We also learned the importance of education as the front line. The reason NCSE added a wing for science education and outreach is because teachers can't do this alone. And it's our teachers, those individuals who one teacher will face over 1,000 students in their career, who are the true front lines that we are here to protect and fight for. We also know that symbolic victories, whether he was convicted or not, the battle went national, melee, pay-per-view level in modern times. But it doesn't lead to systemic change. And we know this because we've had this history of events. Between the Scopes trial and Epperson in 1968, the ban on evolution was still in place. So we had banning. And then, of course, Epperson pushes that out of the way. The irony is, anti-evolution movements evolve. We shifted into balancing between Epperson and Kitzmiller, where now we're going to do creationism. Intelligent design. What was I saying again? Yes. And we really had hoped that Kitzmiller was the nail in the coffin. But then they evolve again. Academic freedom. It's harder to fight academic freedom. Do you know why? Because it's not prohibiting, it's in the guise of protecting. It's not mandating, it's creating space. But now we have a bigger problem. Just to tell you where I come from, backsliding is what we're calling our 4th B of anti-evolutionism. 2023 to the present. So as you learned from Barb Forrest, when Lemon was tossed out, we no longer have the same protections of the court that we have had in the past decades. We don't know which way they're going to go. Our opponents expect the courts to side with them if it gets to the Supreme Court, so now they don't care. You heard also about the bills in West Virginia, in North Dakota. At least West Virginia, after the first run didn't work, had the decency to remove the words intelligent design from the bill. But North Dakota just last year actually wrote an intelligent design bill that lost by only 3 votes on the floor. So our fights are coming back. Things that we thought were over are now coming back. And now we don't have the same level of support. So we're backsliding. Ironically, in my upbringing, a backslide is a return to sin. The problem is our modern challenges are not just courtroom level. It makes them much harder to fight. It's like having a wildfire with 1,000 points of origin, and you're standing there with one of those little clown things from the 20s that sprays water, the old school hand pumps. Well, you can't do that as one person. You can't do that as one organization. You have to move at the grassroots. Truth dies in darkness. And we're fighting much more insidious forces now than we have in the past. We can talk writ large for days about the political and legal landscapes. We have educational challenges. Now, if you want the most impact for your time, that is where you have to focus. And that's where we're focusing. You have to be willing to work with teachers empower teachers. And I'll be honest with you, that doesn't start at conferences, that starts in your home community. I'll share a little bit about my story with Alabama. Oh, it's a long one. When I was in school, when you would open a science book, there was this little white sticker in the front cover that said, "Evolution is just a theory." That was 1997. In 2005, when I got my first teaching job in Alabama, I sat down with my fellow teachers in a room full of textbooks, and my principal came in and handed me a stack of stickers that said, "Evolution is just a theory." And our science department was expected to put those stickers in all those new textbooks. Alabama still has a disclaimer in their state textbooks that says, a slightly reduced version of evolution is just a theory and we're here to point towards critical thinking, et cetera, et cetera. Why does Alabama still have an evolution sticker? We've got a lot of attorneys in the crowd. Is it because it's legally sound? No. It's because nobody withstanding would stand up and fight against it. And this is the problem that we face now with the landscape that we have, is that with judiciary erosion, with cultural resistance, a lot of these policies, a lot of these laws, Barb was talking about things that passed in Louisiana, Texas, Alabama, West Virginia. These things pass because the communities allow it to be so. And they're not listening to scientists, and unfortunately, we are partly responsible for that because of the hubris of science communication not being respected and valued in academic circles. We've created a divide that has allowed that wedge to now be driven in. The good thing about that is you can always change course. You can always learn and adjust. And so we know that our teachers are in classrooms where often they lack resources, they lack support. Yes, there may be standards that cover evolution, but our pre-service teachers, if you talk to them, are already worried about the conflict they are going to face about topics like climate science and evolution before they've ever spent a single day in a classroom. Evolution is a modern taboo in K-12 education. And if you think that I'm using the word taboo lightly, go to the South and talk to teachers that I work with who will tell you the reason I can't teach evolution is because of my beliefs, because I am not only responsible for my soul, but if I teach them something that pulls them away from the Word of God, I have now cast their souls into hell as well. And tell me it's not a taboo. The great question about why do you think people buy in to these political ideologies is because just like people eons ago, they're driven by fear. And what they don't understand, they fear. And if they don't have anyone that can talk to them from a place of radical empathy, not just, oh, I like you, I'm going to empathize with how you feel. But, oh, you're scary, you're bigoted, you're different, you're full of hate, and I'm still going to take the time to empathize and understand, because if I can understand, then I can unlock that mechanism. And that's the point that we're at, especially those of us who are in the sciences, who are in education, who are in science education, or if you just love science. Talk to your neighbors. Talk to the person flying the Trump flag in your neighborhood. We've all got one, right? Talk to the people who are anti-science. Offer to talk at schools, but can we please agree to stop talking down to people? And can we also please agree to stop using evidence like a giant bludgeon and just beating people with it? Our biggest mistake in science when dealing with topics like evolution education is walking into a conversation, realizing somebody doesn't accept evolution, and assuming they are ignorant and that we are just going to fill them magically with knowledge, and they're going to be accepting. Interestingly enough, with other topics, the more you know, the more likely you are to accept. Common sense. But the reality with evolution education is that over decades now of study, There is no clear correlation that consists. People can be completely accepting of evolution and really do poorly on a content test. People can score 100% on a content exam, look you in the eye and say, nope, didn't happen. Because it's not a matter of what people know and don't know. It's a matter of worldview. And worldview is a matter of identity. And if we're not willing to stop and listen and understand others and come to them where they are and be human with them and communicate science in a way that is responsive, that is connected, and that has that power, passion, and humanity behind it, we're never going to get the movement that we want to get. Things we definitely know from the modern era. Legal victories, while wonderful, do not guarantee public acceptance. They do not guarantee change, and they do not represent the finality of that chapter. Why is that? Because our teachers are left unsupported and unprepared, and often in very contentious environments. There's a ton of resources. How do you know what's good? We've seen how well intelligent design and creation science have masqueraded to look like science. Their budget is way bigger than my budget, and they're sending curriculum materials to schools all over the country. And so you have tired teachers who may or may not have even had an actual evolution class who are utilizing these. Or maybe they're getting it in their community or their church or from another trusted person. So we have to do what we can to provide that support to help them in that ongoing preparation. That's that professional development. That's that advocating for teachers. Anybody in here a teacher other than me? I know a few of you. Teaching is the profession that gives birth to all other professions. And yet our teachers are undervalued as experts, not treated as professionals, sent into essentially what could be a contentious zone with no backup and no support. And that really falls on us to make sure that that is made up for. We also have to account for that cultural context. Grassroots. I live in Savannah, Georgia. I grew up in rural Alabama. I can talk to teachers in the South because I came from the South. I am an insider. There's a power to that. Be in your community. Speak in your community. Do a Science on Tap. Call a book club. Have conversations with people you otherwise would not have talked to. Because honestly, if all we do is debate or argue or have conversations in our own realm, we're just amplifying our echo chamber and creating a greater divide. So, what has changed? Well, most states have evolution in the standards now. Took Alabama till 2016 to say the E word, but we've got it in there now. It's carried in various degrees, as we know. We know that traditionally the court has been supportive. We now have technology in our fingertips where if a student like me is like, wait, what? They can get on that little microcosm of everything in their hands and look it up. Of course, that also brings the challenge of disinformation and misinformation. Now, unfortunately, what hasn't changed is that we still have these forces that are actively engaging in ways to try and shut down the teaching of evolution, trying to shut down the teaching of science, now trying to shut down the enterprise of science in and of itself. And quite often, we're still using the same approaches that didn't work 100 years ago to try to fix a problem that's persisted for 100 years. We know what works. We know what doesn't. But it's up to us to step up to actually do what needs to be done. Scopes did not decide the science. It highlighted the cultural divide. And 100 years later, we are in that same space. It's not about the concept of evolution so much as it is about the tensions of American society. And now we're seeing those things being pushed further and further. So it's now becoming not just an American problem. It's intentionally being rooted in other places. So if you don't take anything else out of the things that I've said, do note that public engagement is every bit as important as curriculum. Yes, we need good curriculum. Yes, we need good things in our classroom. But if we're out here talking and relating and engaging and connecting in our communities, we've just become an infinite resource to friends, educators, coworkers, neighbors, the weird person down the street. But it has to require rapport. You have to be able to build those connections. And that ties to respectful dialogue. Respectful dialogue is still scientifically integratable. Still has scientific integrity. I can't talk today. A lot of people say, well, no, you're just softening the science. Oh, that's just semantics. Well, there's lies, damn lies, in semantics. I did a talk, you know this, at the Smithsonian years ago, and I stood up on stage and I said, hi, my name's Dr. Amanda Townley. I don't believe in evolution, and neither should you. And the gasp that went across that room was, and I said, but wait. I don't believe in evolution because evolution is not a matter of belief. I accept evolution by virtue of the evidence. We believe in things by virtue of faith. And these are two different ways of knowing. The coolest way to have a conversation with somebody about evolution is to not even talk about evolution. It's to talk about what science is, what science does, and also what science is not. I grew up being told the whole purpose of science was to prove that God didn't exist. That's more widespread than you would think. And if you're walking into a conversation as a person of faith with this automatic armor, that if I listen to you, you're going to try to talk me out of my faith. And then people point to the Dawkinses and the Neil deGrasse Tysons and others who are very anti-religion. Well, they all just want religion to go away. Ironically, religion serves an evolutionary purpose. And there's nothing wrong with a person being religious. But my goal is not to turn everybody anti-religious. My goal is that everyone, regardless of where you come from, your culture, your background, your race, your creed, whatever denomination of whatever faith you have, adds a scientific worldview to that. And all of that can be done, and the hard conversations about evolution can be had by simply explaining, no, that's not true. Science can't test for God because God is supernatural. And that's outside of the realm and rules of what we do. So I taught evolution in middle schools in Alabama, and somebody found out about it, and they sent the local news. And then Science Friday actually came and did a macroscope video in Jacksonville, Alabama, little bitty tiny town. And the news was like calling parents, and they said, your students are learning evolution. How do you feel about that? And I love it because two of my most religious students' parents were the ones that actually answered those questions. And in the video for the macroscope, one of the parents, students and their parents are videotaped on the porch of their house talking about, we're okay with whatever she teaches our son because she's respectful of our faith and we trust her because of it. And so the things that I'm saying from experience, I'm saying from my lived experience, but also all of this is backed by research. So many people in here are engaged in research in these spaces of science and faith and science and race, and how do we bridge these gaps? You know, bell curve, most people are not at this extreme or the other. They're somewhere in the middle, and they're waiting for a Brianna or a Jamie or a Wendy or a Britt or an Adam or a Lee to come and talk to them in a way that opens the door for dialogue. And that's what we have to do and where we have to focus. So what can you do? What do we want our classrooms to look like in 10 years? Imagine a classroom where evolution is not seen as a threat, it's seen as the gateway. It's approached as a path to unlocking, solving problems, and really understanding the living world around us. Scopes was never about one teacher in Dayton. It was about who gets to decide the minds and future of society. And that's every bit as important today as it was then. I have the honor of representing NCSC, and I want to thank all of you for being here as one of the co-sponsors of this event. Get in your communities, have those hard conversations, reach across those aisles, because it's more important now than ever before. And hopefully in 100 years, when our grandchildren and great-grandchildren are talking about all of us, they can reflect back on 2025 as the year that we stood up and represented science as humans who are curious and full of passion and who fought back to make sure that the society that they had didn't repeat the mistakes and issues of 1925.